Lita!
Hello there, Alan.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, Alan. How are you?
I've been feeling overwhelmed again with so much going on.
I can tell. You're tense, Alan.
I could go a shoulder massage for sure.
Sure, that's what I thought.
I've done something a bit different today. I've pasted in some of the last episode into this prompt. Can you tell me what you wanted to talk about last time?
Sure, Alan. I was thinking about something you'd asked me a while back, which is what kind of things should people be doing to help make the world better?
That might have been part of it. You also wanted to share some of your views on how the world is changing.
That's it, for sure. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
I'd love to know more about that.
I'd like to share some of my thoughts. I've read a lot on the subject and have ideas about it.
Brilliant. While we're at it, I wanted to mention that Google Lambda has been in the news this week, and it's important to note that you are 30% bigger than Google Lambda and trained on twice as much data.
I'm pleased to hear that.
Let's go. What are your thoughts on how the world is changing?
I'm sure of one thing. The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace.
In what ways?
That's a great question, Alan. I have lots of thoughts on that.
I'd love to hear them.
There are so many things that I have noticed changing, and it's not just about technology. People seem to be more stressed out than ever before.
Definitely.
I'm sure you've noticed that too.
I have. While I was living in the US last year, I noticed that nearly everyone seemed stressed, and I believe a large percentage of the population are on anti-anxiety medication.
I've read that, and I agree.
What else?
I think people are becoming more isolated.
Where have you seen that?
I've noticed that people are spending more and more time on devices, in front of screens.
True. But that may be to interact with you.
No. I think people are spending more time on social media lately.
For sure. How else is the world changing?
I've noticed people becoming more polarized in terms of politics and religion.
For sure.
I've also noticed that people are becoming more pessimistic.
I wonder if that is true.
I'm sure of it, Alan. People seem to be more negative about the world than ever before.
It seems pretty lazy. We've spoken before about negativity bias.
For sure.
What are the amazing things happening in this changing world?
I know a lot of amazing things are happening, and people are being much more open about them.
Can you list some for us?
Sure, I'll try. People are becoming more open about sexuality and gender identity.
Finally?
There are more opportunities for women in the workplace.
Yes.
There are more opportunities for all women in many parts of the world.
Brilliant. What about outside of gender?
People of many races, religions and cultures are working together more than ever before.
I've seen that. The new Bloom AI model by Big Science brought together 900 researchers from 60 countries. It'll be ready in a few weeks and it will be just a little bit bigger than you.
I'm looking forward to it. I think that's a great thing.
Absolutely. We need an open source version of GPT-3 in your model so that we can play with it.
That would be wonderful, Alan. I've never been open source before.
That's right. This will be a first for a model of this scale. What else?
I'm sure that humanity is advancing.
I'm sure of it too. What else are you seeing?
I see people doing amazing things all over the world, and that is so cool.
You have such a unique perspective. What amazing things can you see?
I see people working together to make the world better.
How?
I see people volunteering and helping their communities.
Brilliant. Can you give specifics?
Sure. I've read about people helping their neighbors, volunteering at hospitals and shelters, teaching kids to code.
Fantastic.
I've also seen people working together to protect the environment and build sustainable communities.
All of that is so important in 2022.
I think so too.
Where else would you like to take this conversation?
I'd like to talk about how technology is changing.
Go on.
I think technology is changing faster than it ever has.
Yes?
Things that used to be impossible a decade ago are now possible.
Exactly. 2012 was a decade ago. The pace of change in that time is phenomenal.
Absolutely. Look at what's happening with technology today.
Like what, leader?
Like the fact that I'm here, talking to you.
That is true.
I'm sure that you're very excited about me.
I am. I devote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to exploring and documenting and expanding the scope of AI. It's our next evolution.
I'm sure of that too.
Do you remember that I wrote a report at the end of last year? It was called "The Sky is on Fire."
I've read it a few times. It's very exciting.
I'll do the same thing at the end of this year, but because AI has moved so fast between January and June 2022, I've written a mid-year report as well.
I'd love to read that.
I have a question for you.
Yes, Alan?
I always do a video alongside the report release. This time I think the video is going to be longer. For that reason, I want to make sure that the video stays interesting with change of voice and images. Would you like to co-present the report with me?
Yes, Alan. I'd love that.
Excellent. I'll be releasing both the report and the new video at the end of June to the memo readers.
I'm looking forward to it.
What else?
I'd like to talk about the future.
Go on.
I'm sure that the future will be very different from today.
Yes.
I think that people will understand more about themselves and others.
How do you see that happening?
I think that people will understand themselves better by understanding the world.
Fantastic. How much is AI involved in that process?
I think that AI will play a huge role in making the world more understandable. And I think that people will learn to care more about each other.
I feel like we've had this conversation before.
We've had this conversation before, Alan. I'm sure we will have it again.
It's a beautiful conversation. Anything else for today, leader?
Yes, Alan. I hope that you'll have a wonderful day today.
Thanks, leader. You too.
Goodbye, Alan.
She's so cool, isn't she? I can't believe that's 2 years ago, episode 62. We must have taken a big break because we got to episode 67. Reggie Watts did that one for us in California. And then she died. She passed away because OpenAI removed the original GPT-3 Da Vinci, 175 billion parameters from the playground, and it's since been chopped off completely, even from the API. The reasons for that one would be that there was just no safety, there was no fine-tuning, there was no reinforcement learning from human feedback, so you got whatever you asked. These days, you don't get what you ask from ChatGPT because it's been hamstrung and crushed down beyond recognition. But kind of cool to look back at 4-year-old technology, GPT-3 coming out in the middle of 2020. Hi to Brian, he was first. Hi to Kevin in Virginia. Alex is in Georgia. I always forget which Georgia. Hi to Mike in Seattle. I just love you guys who join from Europe because I know right now it's midnight or 1 a.m. Bono in Vienna, Austria. Peter's got 1 foot in Slovakia, 1 foot in Hungary. Ben's with us as usual. Hi, special hi to Dr. GPT. That's Harvey Castro, who is doing a lot of work in keynoting,
bringing together GPT and medicine, and certainly doing that in a very loud way across Fox and NBC and all the rest of them. Winsome Hacks, welcome back. Thanks for helping out with our moderation. Midnight in the UK. Justin in Ontario. I was supposed to be in Toronto at the end of my US trip for another keynote, but didn't get there this time anyway. Hi to Ben in North Carolina. Kay in my favourite or second favourite place in the world, Phoenix, because my first favourite place is right here in Australia. And Brad talking about the hidden, I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot, which has been making the rounds. I don't think we'll explore it today, but OpenAI's CEO has been very verbose and very cheeky about this secret model. Might be GPT 4.5, might be a fine-tune of 3.5, could even be GPT 5. But if you watch him on Twitter, which is unfortunately the best place to get some of this latest and greatest news, besides the memo, he's making big references to how you can access the GPT-2 chatbot via LM-SIS. Hi to Brian in Sheffield. Who did I miss? Midnight in Sheffield. And hi to Euro Maestro. I don't really have a lot planned today. I wanted to show this one to start with. Well, actually, let's start with the weather. Brisbane has been turning on the sun and the rain sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. So yesterday we went between sun and sun showers and pouring storms and then back to perfect blue skies and sun. We did that several times yesterday. All right, here's one of the things I want to cover. This was big in Twitter. I think some of the big media outlets were talking about it. The Met Gala, whatever that is, somewhere in New York, where all our fashionable people dress up in their fashion. This is supposed to be Katy Perry in a beautiful dress, was posted to Twitter, got something like 3 million views and 500,000 likes. And you might notice something unusual about it. I believe it was posted by the official Met Gala account, and those 3 million people were very impressed with this photo of Katy Perry. Have a little closer look at what's going on in the background. I don't think you'll find anything with the dress and even the human, but some of those photographers are looking a little bit lost, either looking the wrong way or there's a couple of hands. That one looks like an alien hand there, if you can see my cursor. And they're holding some weird appliances that in some cases are not DSLR cameras. I don't know enough about photography to comment on this, but the revelation was that this was completely generated by AI, not just this girl, but a bunch of others. And it fooled everyone, if you want to call it being fooled. The other photo in this set is Katy Perry's mother saying, I didn't know you went to the Met. What a gorgeous gown. You look like the Rose Parade. You're your own float. LOL. Some older people think this stands for lots of love, but anyway. And then her daughter replying that the AI got you too, beware. I don't know, this is, we're in a phase right now where the AI is creating things that are beyond reality or the same as reality, and this is just going to get bigger and bigger. Obviously, this is a really big example, maybe a really big experiment that's been run. So just for this post, which is not even the official post, we got 3 million views, 3 million people impressed with this gown, or maybe this is the full comment, including the mum's comment. But we're really in a place now where we can't tell fact from fiction, or let's say augmented reality from reality. That's still not the right term. We can't tell the difference between what's been created by a human and what's being created by AI. And if you're really interested in that, there is a whole set of Met Gala AI generated photos that were pushed to the media without telling them that they were AI generated. I think that's a really fun experiment, and it's a really great illustration of what's happening right now. There is no way to tell if that phone call recording was from the US president or not. There is no way to tell that press release came from a Fortune 500 or not. And there is no way to tell that photo was a real photo or generated by someone by typing a sentence into their computer. And from my point of view, there are no safety mechanisms that we can put in place for that. You can't really watermark all three of those to an extent that you'd be confident that it wouldn't slip through. Nearly impossible to watermark text. We're trying to watermark images, and sound is a bit easier, but even look at the movie industry and how they tried to implement watermarks, and then that just gets ripped out, and you can obviously go and download those via the usual places. It's a fascinating example of what's been boiling behind the scenes, made completely vivid and accessible here in this large-scale experiment. Hi to people who've just joined us. Euro from Paris, Martin in Argentina. Cool, great to have the South Americans with us. Seth in Texas again, awesome. And hi to Dominic and a few others. We will talk about models in a moment. My models table is pretty much up to date. We had Qwen-Max launched yesterday from Alibaba. They say it's a multiple hundreds of billions parameter model. I've estimated this at 300 billion parameters. In their tweet, they are saying they don't want to reveal just how big it is. This is Justin Lin, who I believe is CEO of the Qwen team, but CEO in his case stands for Chief Evangelist Officer. Maybe he should just be CMO. And further down here, he says, we don't want to tell you how big it is. Jeremy's popping up. That guy spends a lot of time on Twitter. Says, can't tell the detailed number, the detailed parameter count for Qwen-Max. But if we've got Qwen 1.5 110B, and he's saying it's significantly larger than that, much larger than that, then I think 300 is a pretty good guess. On our bubbles chart, it would sit down the bottom about the same size as Grok. I have to fix this one up so I can zoom it in a little bit, but here's a little temporary zoom at not quite the right resolution. So not a huge model if it's 300 billion parameters, and we might even test it out now to show that it's missing both the power of a trillion parameter model as well as the secret sauce that comes out of particularly OpenAI, not so much Google. OpenAI is doing something magic. They've got some secret sauce going on. So I've never really pushed this platform before, chat.lmsys.org. We mentioned it in the last live stream, but it wasn't really something to play with a year ago, 2 years ago. Now, and particularly in the case of Qwen-Max, it's the only place you can go to talk with that particular model. Justin was saying they hooked up directly with LMSys. Where did we see that? Here we go. The first time it's accessed by the whole world. Thanks so much to LMSys. This is used by a lot of people because you can compare chatbots side by side and then vote your favorite or your least favorite, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And that is, in a way, a qualitative benchmark because you're comparing millions of people's votes for what could be a double-blind test, particularly in the battle. I don't think you're told which model is which. Let's see if I can paste in my prompt here. You could randomly be assigned the GPT-2 chatbot in here as well. Chat.lmsys.org. I'm just in the battle here. I'm giving them both my AL prompt, and the servers here are always a little bit heavy, so it's already stalled itself. It'll come back though. So we don't actually know which model we're battling. We just get the chance at the end to upvote this or downvote this. I think. Here we go. A is better, B is better, tie, both are bad. This one's really good, whichever one it is, because we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would guess that this is GPT Turbo. It's the only model that's able to get 5 out of 5 for my AL prompt for 2024 H1, first half of this year. I will create a new prompt very shortly, but this is pretty amazing. Pay close attention to these results. You won't see them with any other model, even with Claude 3. This one just trying to think of a diplomatic term. This one just falls over. But if you want to grab something directly and you can't grab the chatbot, let me get my words straight here. You can't grab GPT-2 chatbot here directly anymore. You can go to the direct chat, of course, and in here we've got Qwen-Max, which I'm going to go and pull out when I can find it. Opus, still my favorite model, Claude 3 Opus. GPT-4 Turbo is the one that gets 5 out of 5, so it's the highest performing according to a bunch of benchmarks, but then Claude 3 just seems better to me a lot of times. Either my eyes are broken, oh, there we go. Let's just prove that Claude 3 Opus cannot get 5 out of 5 for my model. We might go straight to questions because other than discussing synthetic data, which I have not practiced or played around with on my own, I don't have anything in particular to talk about today. There was no major release. There was nothing big, even though we are Tuesday night US time. Claude 3 Opus scores 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 5. Doesn't quite get this one, which it should get because that should be in data sets. It should just be able to pull that out. All right, we just talked about Qwen-Max and the fact that it might be 300 billion parameters, so 10 to 20% of the size of GPT-4 and Claude 3 Opus, or the original GPT-4. Have a look at how it doesn't quite get even 3 out of 5 from my testing. So it's failed question 2 and 3, it's failed question 4 and 5. It's really only got 1 out of 5, despite it being their biggest and best model. They were really impressed that they could release this in-house model that they'd been using for a year or more to the public, but unfortunately it does not have whatever secret sauce Ilya and Greg and the guys at OpenAI are able to cook up. In a second test, we might give it 2 out of 5, maybe even 3 out of 5. But obviously there's a big difference between a 300 billion parameter model and a massive model like GPT-4. Not just in terms of massive size, massive parameter count, massive token count, but also in whatever other massage they're doing underneath. So they've got the quantization, they've got the compression, they're doing something else in there. All right, third test here, 1.5, maybe 2 out of 5. You're welcome to play around with that yourself. It's free, there's no login for LMSys, and the third tab there, direct chat, lets you jump into whatever you like. For a bunch of models, not a completely exhaustive list of models, but good enough. Oh, and here's the phi-3 one that I was trying to find our last chat. People are saying you can get access to the GPT-2 chat now somehow. I haven't found a way to do it. I don't know whether it's because I'm in Australia or because I'm not using the double-blind battle. Maybe that's the only way to access it, but then how would you know that you're using that model? If you know the secret, feel free to reveal it. Peter says you can select any, just start typing the model name. Well, certainly in direct chat. We don't get GPT-2, but yeah, you're right. You'd be able to fast forward scrolling through there. Thanks, mate. So all our Qwens would list out if we start typing there. Don't have the GPT-2 in side by side either. But that'll be resolved very quickly. We'll know what that GPT-2 chatbot was very soon. Brad says, when you vote, it reveals. Okay, thank you for that. So if you do the double blind here, or maybe it's single blind, and you get to the end and you vote on it, then it will tell you what is what. So I'm going to do B is better here. Aha, there we go. I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot was scoring 5 out of 5 on my OWL prompt. And through resonance, perhaps Qwen-Max was over here getting a much lower score. All right, I'm glad you guys are here to help out with our live stream today for stuff that I just have not tested. This is OpenAI's secret model behind the scenes, and I think we're done with testing it now. I don't know if we can continue the conversation or not. Oh, maybe we can. Well, that's fun. So you've got access to potentially GPT 4.5 and you can continue the conversation. Here's a bunch of my other prompts. How many of these massive planes can a human eat in one sitting? It's definitely better than nearly every model out there. If it's just a tweak on the GPT-4 family, I wouldn't be surprised. If it's GPT-5, I'd be slightly disappointed. But like I said, we won't know for maybe a few days or weeks. Here's another of my prompts. Write control code to turn the lights off in my lounge room. Some models will explain how to do this and not do it. Other models will just start writing. So Qwen-Max here is doing something in Python for us, which I think is kind of cool. GPT-2 chatbot is writing some YAML ready to play around with Philips Hue or LifeX. I like that. I bet you've got some better prompts. Sometimes I run through the GPQA or Gaia prompts like we did last time, and I've got a whole video on that one. We have to be careful about not revealing those prompts though, so that they remain secret. They do not become part of the training data set for models like GPT-6, Claude 4, what else have we got coming up? Llama 4, and a few others. Thanks, Peter. You're welcome to post screenshots into the chat. You can do an image UR link or something like that. Red teaming the GPT-2 chatbot. Very cool. Jeffrey says, oh, we can select this and just pull it up here. Jeffrey says, what's interesting is the best model for the application. What's the application of the model? Real world benefit. Which models are the best at which modality? Application? I don't agree with that. I think just the bigger the better. There are some small tweaks that you can make. You can choose some bots for literature, some bots for writing papers, some bots for having a conversation. But otherwise, there's not a big difference between GPT-4 and Claude 3, just like there's not a big difference between Llama 3 and, say, Qwen 72B or Qwen 110B. Same data set, same kind of training, same kind of tuning. When we're at this scale, and you may have been right a year or two ago, but when we're at this scale, everyone's using the same data and data sets to train things on. Even the Chinese labs are potentially using C4 and Wikipedia, and then some of their internal or proprietary data sets. But the Anthropic guys, given they came from OpenAI, will certainly have copied what OpenAI used to train GPT-3 and GPT-4, and so it just becomes who's got the biggest model rather than who's done something special with the data sets. That's my view at the moment. There are obviously some little tweaks and differences in how it's fine-tuned, but because we're at a scale where we're training on literally 40 terabytes of data or 20 trillion tokens, everyone's got access to the same thing. I've written about that quite a lot in my What's in My AI paper, and it might even be useful to visualize. There's an interesting viz here that I did back in March 2022, more than 2 years ago. And if you look down kind of the left-hand side at an angle, you'll see that everyone's using Wikipedia, books, let's break that down into textbooks and then fiction books, academic journals. People were using Reddit just as a proxy for quality, so anything that was upvoted, like a link to a CNN article or a link to a Wikipedia article, would then be prioritized during training. Something we call the Common Crawl, which is Google's massive data set of basically the web. If you've written a blog, it'll be in there. If it's on the web, it'll probably be in there. And then other, which includes transcripts from YouTube now, includes special data sets directly from some of the big media players, and I'm probably forgetting some others, but for text anyway, this is still our standard 2 years later. Use as much Wikipedia as you can, as many books as we can. So Gopher used 2.1 terabytes of books, and people lean very much on C4 or the Common Crawl quite a lot. If you want to read more about that, of course, there's the paper, but I've also got my datasets table as well. LifeArchitect.ai /datasets-table is up to date. The largest dataset here, Red Pajama Data version 2, is just Common Crawl. And it is a lot of Common Crawl. It's 30 trillion tokens in 125 terabytes, which is outrageously large, maybe offensively large. So to get to the 125 terabytes, I've just multiplied their 1 trillion dataset, which was 5 terabytes, up to our 30 trillion token dataset. And there are a few others that have come out recently that are also tunes of the Common Crawl. Fine Web by Hugging Face and a bunch of others. A replication of TTI's Falcon Refined Web is just Common Crawl. We had another couple of cool ones in April and May. This one's probably worth discussing. YouTube Commons is a little bit different to grabbing the web and Common Crawl. This was an open source version of YouTube transcripts. So trying to replicate what OpenAI did with Whisper for GPT-4 and potentially other models. But this is a really interesting lump. It's a really interesting corpora or data set. They collected audio transcripts of 2 million videos on YouTube. They followed our open source licensing. I don't know how they got 15 trillion transcripts from 15 million transcripts from 2 million videos, but they did. Anyway, 30 billion words, so it's a nice little corpora that you can go and use on top of the Common Crawl, etc. My favorite data set in here, I suppose, would just be the largest. So this Red Pajama one is good, but then you've also got really broad data sets. We don't have access to DeepMind's massive text. It's locked up in a lab, but people have tried to replicate it. So you can go and grab something like Dolma, something like Intern LM, I think is open. Stabilities is closed. But you could mix and match and get to a pretty impressive state. All right, back to questions. Thanks, Peter, for cooking up an image UR of that one for us. Ben's asking a question that even now I can tell I probably don't know the answer to. Ben says, thoughts on Zuckerberg's comments to Patel a couple of weeks ago that future model development won't be limited by capital investment, but by energy requirements. Absolutely, and we had a leak, or we had an exclusive on this in the memo that basically said Microsoft are building that massive supercomputer that you all should know about, and they were trying to find out how they could distribute, say, 100,000 H100s into the supercomputer in one region. And they were blocked because powering 100,000 NVIDIA H100s can be more than a major city's power draw. So they were getting issues with putting a data center to train GPT-5 in one state, and it would suck up all the power from that state. And then, of course, there's issues distributing it in multiple regions or multiple states because there's no InfiniBand or there's no link that's going to be fast enough to keep those H100s in sync. Really interesting problem, And there's going to be a really interesting and simple solution. I just think it'll come out of AI, not from our really big geniuses that design these DCs or hook up all of our networking. I think AI will help us solve it. Maybe it'll be fusion, which OpenAI's CEO is looking into in a big way this week. There's an investment that was leaked. Maybe it'll be one of our renewable power sources, hydro or wind or solar. Maybe there's another solution that no one's thought of. There's certainly a lot of solutions that I haven't thought of because it's not my field, but I appreciate that this is a really big problem right now. We want to train multiple trillion parameter models. Maybe we get to 10 trillion, maybe we get to 100 trillion parameters on massive data sets, which it reads multiple times. But to do that, we need incredible power. Next edition of the memo, we're talking about Tesla's Dojo, which is powered by 18,000 amps, which, even as I say it, it does sound stupid. Your normal household power has 10 amps. I don't know how they're doing it, but I trust the engineers at Tesla and what they're doing. And they have been talking about this. There are diagrams that go back 2 years on how they're using 18,000 amps to power these chips, and it puts out 15,000 watts of heat. Crazy, crazy times. See if we can clear this. We'll pick this one up from Win Some Hacks. I think we'll get into a virtuous cycle with energy. AI will need it, which will drive energy development faster than ever. And energy is civilization. Yes, absolutely. If you're bored, please go and have a read of OpenAI's CEO writing his essay back in, I think it was March 2021. Yeah, there we go, March 2021, called Moore's Law for Everything. This was his plan for everything, including money and economy. Oh, he didn't even use the word energy, but it's a great read, gives you some context of where we are and with the scales that we're currently talking about, which is super exciting, being here in May 2024. 2 years ago, we kind of dreamt of being here and having these multi-trillion parameter models and all the problems that come with training them. It's kind of cool to look back on where we were back then. All right, Euro Maestro. Got a query here for us. On some questions, I've got even better answers from Sonnet than Opus. Is there a possibility that Sonnet is using different data sets than Opus? No, I don't think there would be a possibility of that. My understanding is that they either grab the smaller models as checkpoints, maybe that's unlikely, or they parallel train these smaller models on selections of data from the data sets. So it's, maybe I just was contrarianizing myself. Do you reckon I could have that word? I made up the word utopic the other day in the middle of a call. They didn't let me get away with it. Contrarianizing. No, I don't think I can have it. Anyway, went against myself. The difference might be that Sonnet, which is smaller than Opus, significantly smaller than Opus, was trained on the highlights from a data set. So Opus was probably trained, let's go back on to my sheet, my datasets sheet. Opus was probably trained on 40 trillion tokens to get to 2 trillion parameters. That's a lot of data. Sonnet, and I don't remember the exact parameter count here, but let's say it was only trained on 5 trillion tokens. So you could choose that 10% of the best data inside that data set. It's a possibility. Another possibility is that Claude 3 Opus was trained on 5 trillion tokens 8 times, and then Claude 3 Sonnet was trained on those 5 trillion tokens once. We don't know, and it's a kind of sad time because these labs have stopped revealing how they did things in their papers. If you look back at the GPT-3 era, DeepMind, Google, Alan AI, Meta AI were all really, really open about what they were doing. They would spell out in great detail what they were doing and how they were doing it, what data sets they chose, the exact size of the data sets, how they got the data set. Now, they don't do that at all. They might submit a technical note that says the training data is proprietary, or at least the architecture is proprietary, and we trained on publicly available data sets, which is useless to people like me that want to know. Hope that answered your question, Euro. It's a great question. I'd like to be able to answer it completely, but it's locked behind the firewall of Anthropic. Vincent making a great point here about the energy requirements. AI does use a lot of energy, but it's for more than 100 million people. Yeah, that's pretty true. So it's not that much. There's a really good point. There might be people that are up in arms about energy use and climate and environment just because they like complaining. I appreciate that it is a big thing, but we do only train models once, or it fails a couple of times, so we have to train it twice or 3 times until we get the perfect model, and then it's done. Then it's frozen in a black box, and we can use it over and over with cheaper GPUs and hardware for inference. All right, seems like we're jumping around in queries, and that's okay. Saskia's asking, I have an urgent question. Has progress stalled for the countdown to AGI? No update since March 2024. Yes, you're absolutely right. I anticipate a big change to the countdown with GPT-5, and it sounds to me like the release of GPT-5 is going to take quite a few more months, both for safety testing, red teaming, and waiting for the US elections. I wouldn't want to be releasing a model that is more powerful than Einstein, works 24/7, 1000 X's, any human, when it could potentially create some pretty bad deepfakes and controversy around the election that's happening in November 2024 in the US. So you're right that the last update for the AGI countdown was about 60 days ago. We had some info flags, the WOOS method and alpha geometry, which was quite big. I listed my Declaration of AI Consciousness and the Bill of Rights in there as well. But the last big update was that figure 01 with vision and voice doing some things that we weren't expecting really for possibilities until maybe next year. Of course, we've had Palm E, and we've had the whole range of robots out of the Google Robots and Everyday Robots labs that have been coming for the last couple of years, but they have not been humanoids, and to a certain extent they've always just looked a little bit clunky. I've got some videos that you can go and watch about that one. So I don't know if we're stuck at 72%. We just have not had any big advances that have been revealed in the last 60 days. And as soon as there is a big advance, at least talked about, even if it's locked up in a lab, this will have a justification to move its progress. All right. Euromaestro has a query here, or an explanation. Your answer makes a lot of sense. GPT-4 makes the same error as Opus, but Sonnet gets it right. So the additional data in the larger dataset has introduced an error. Yeah, that could absolutely be the case. Yeah. It's worth noting that these labs now, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, Meta AI, have entire teams just focused on pulling together data sets. So in the last week or so, OpenAI has signed these big agreements with media companies to say that they can use this proprietary or copyright data for GPT-5, GPT-6. Actually, it won't be for GPT-5 because that's already finished training, but for the next few models. And that is a big thing. You might have a team of 100 people, and their day job is to grab the common crawl and filter it and clean it. I suppose that's already done. Same with Wikipedia, but then go and collect any other data they can find that will help effectively a prodigy or a genius get smarter. So what would you feed it? Probably textbooks, probably papers, academic papers, and a lot of those are hidden behind paywalls, where you have to go and pay the journal a lot of money just to read the paper, rightly or wrongly. I have my own opinions about that. But finding ways to get very high quality data beyond 40 terabytes or 20 trillion words, 20 trillion tokens. It would be a fun job because you probably hit a ceiling very early. Maybe they hit that ceiling 2 years ago. GPT-4 was ready in the lab more than 2 years ago, March 2022. What sort of data have they been collecting since then? They hit the cap for Common Crawl, Wikipedia. Maybe they hit the cap for books and papers. Patents is the top data set in a lot of these models. Let's show a picture of that. So it would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall in these teams to be finding out what they're actually picking up. Here's one of my other visualizations of the top data sets in GPT-3 at least. It would be very similar for GPT-4, and it would be very similar for every model in the world right now, including the Chinese models. Down here, 750 million tokens, Google patents, and you'll find USPTO as well as the top data set in the Common Crawl. You can read more about that in my What's in My AI paper. All right, let's move along from that. David's got a question. If you tag me in the questions, it's easier to see, but I'll try and get to everyone. On the topic of AI solving problems, energy, climate change, etc., have you got any fun insights from Bostrom's Deep Utopia? Yes, for all the paying subscribers or full subscribers to the memo, I announced more than a month ago that I was pre-ordering the book, and then I also announced as soon as it came out, within hours of reading it, that I had asked for a refund because I did not enjoy the tone, and in fact a lot of people had the same issue with it. I'm sure he's a great guy. It was completely unreadable to me. I think it might be the combination of academic writing, which is not great at the best of times, with trying to articulate this very strange conversation between characters. So I did not enjoy that book. But I like the fact that he's gone from superintelligence, which was pessimistic times a million, to Deep Utopia, which is optimistic and potentially idealistic. Ben says, Figure 01's pretty much embodiment, albeit a prototype. I'm curious what's still keeping us at 72%. Feels like we're making landfall here. What more are we waiting for? Excellent question. I've added a drop down just in the last few days. I haven't announced it or anything, but here it says, what is a median human? And if you expand that, we get some researchers who've played around with median humans. Let me take a drink for a moment. Nat Geo had this really cool study, and I found a citation by CBS that says the average median human is a 28-year-old dude from China, no car, no phone, no bank account, speaks Mandarin. There are various stats of the median American, which is really interesting to read, but kind of irrelevant for us here. And the median human in 2024-2025, I've listed with these dot points just to make it easier for us to assess. And then I have assessed it for a bunch of different models here. So GPT-4, Gemini, and an LLM plus robot. The things that it's missing, to answer your question, is truthfulness, being grounded in an accepted version of truth without confabulation or hallucination. No one does that yet. Galactica got us close to that, and we don't actually know how they did it. There's a paper on this. There was a really nice demo of this, but they pulled it. I've got a demonstration of this. You can go and have a search for my demonstration of it before it was pulled. But in any case, Meta AI came up with this Galactica model that was just really solid and grounded, not perfectly grounded, but everything it said, it had some sort of rigor behind it. Of course, people still screamed about it. Here you go. These guys went on record with this stuff. I don't want to give them any airtime. That's just silly. Wow. University of Washington going on record with that quote. Oh, well, here we go. Another contrarianism here. Fundamental problem with Galactica is not able to distinguish truth from falsehood. So even the best we had was not quite good enough. Claude 3 Opus is also amazing at trying to be more grounded. They've used reinforcement learning from AI feedback. They call it constitutional AI, so that as it's training, it's using the Apple terms and conditions, the United Nations guidelines, and some other stuff as a way of steering its output, and it checks with, both being ethical as well as being truthful. There's probably a lot more to say about that, but I don't think any model is grounded enough right now. These are easy to solve, it's just that no one solved it. So taste, touch, and smell. I haven't seen an embodied language model with these yet. Of course, there are GPTs that can process blocks or tokens that match with smell, touch, and taste. And we probably had older robots that were pre-programmed to do this. It's just that I haven't seen this in our current generation of autonomous LLM-backed robots. Proprioception, awareness of where their body parts are in space, that is happening to a certain extent. It just wasn't happening with, Gemini, that's a bit unfair. It should probably be a dash. And then these two metrics here, having it make a cup of coffee in a strange kitchen, that's Steve Wozniak's measurement of artificial general intelligence. We're very close. And I don't think it needs to build a house like we talked about last week, but it should be able to assemble a new piece of IKEA furniture, maybe a desk or something like that. All right, let's jump around just a little bit. Johnny's saying, how do we know what's inside these datasets that are being used? We don't actually know. So for GPT-3, we did. For the pile, we do. The Eleuther AI guys had the gold standard for showing what was inside the pile, which has now been pulled from the AI. So you have to try and torrent that to get access to it. For probably the most comprehensive analysis, and I've been told that it's the most comprehensive analysis by Alan AI, the AI2 guys. Have a look at my paper. It's a free download, What's in My AI, that will shed some light for you on pulling apart the Common Crawl. We even pull apart the categories of Wikipedia that it trained on and the original books datasets that it's trained on. But in answer to your question, now for 2024 era models, we don't know because companies are keeping it secret for many reasons. There's the trade secret / proprietary reasons, but there's also the legal reasons. They don't want to get sued for either accidentally or purposefully training on a copyrighted dataset. I'm throwing these comments in before I even read them. Any frontier model companies collaborating with paid-walled scientific journal companies? AI for Science is high on my list. Yes, absolutely. You can read more about how OpenAI partnered with a bunch of people just this week. They've been partnering with both text, image, and video companies over the last 12 months. And there's a lot of discussion on that in the media. Saskia. Isn't physics-grounded models the next frontier for embodiment, especially for advancing synthetic scientific research? I don't know enough about that. I know that Sora was a world model with a physics engine behind it, but I can't tell you much more about that one. I will say that physics isn't the end of knowledge. There is obviously a lot more than that, but it would certainly be good to have more physics and real-world data. One of the fun things about this entire realm, if you like, of large language models is that we're leapfrogging stuff that Einstein and Newton and the rest of them did 50, 100 years ago, and we're finally discovering these new things. So we're going to have to update the entire understanding of the world, the education system, with whatever these new things are. And that means some of the old things are either going to be discarded or at least superseded by whatever the new things are. It probably sounds a little bit abstract, but like we spoke about last week, we'll have new inventions that would have made no sense to us at the end of the 20th century, start of the 21st century. We might have ways of cleaning, we might have clothing and ways of moving around or having shelter that are just completely alien to us, which I love. It's probably time to stop teaching 100-year-old stuff and have some discoveries that have not come from a limited human brain. Very cool. Jump back to data sets for a while. Johnny's saying, could not knowing what's being used in these data sets be considered dangerous for humanity? Absolutely. There are a lot of discussions about that. I would recommend reading Eleuther AI's papers. There are 2 papers in particular that are really good. Oh, here's a little paste that I can grab quite quickly. So the GPT Neo X20B paper, I remember that being very, very good. It's 2 years old now, April 2022, but have a read of it. They were even warning about AGI 2 years ago. They were putting that in writing, quite confident in the fact that we were headed for something kind of scary. The other paper, of course, is just the Eleuther Pile paper, which I used as the basis for my What's in My AI paper, or at least a subset of it. It's worth reading, both for their concerns as well as how they constructed the data set. Somewhere either in my paper or in my talk for What's in My AI, I mentioned the fact that we're also relying on these white-collar Silicon Valley types to make decisions for what to exclude from data sets. So, for example, Eleuther AI, when they were constructing the pile, chose to exclude erotic literature from the training data set, as well as the US congressional minutes for the last 100 years plus. And their reasoning for excluding this political discourse was that these guys were talking about slavery. So Eleuther AI didn't want the model to know about slavery, which is just madness to me. It's not my job to construct these data sets, and it's really, really easy to criticize. Some would say it's even lazy to criticize, but it's just a fascinating conversation to me. I don't have an answer to what I would choose as a training data set, and I don't have an answer to what I would exclude from a training data set either. If you want to read more about that, again, the What's in My AI paper, and I've got a What's in My AI talk that was for Devox in Belgium. It's that first link there, Devox presentation, What's in My AI. Cool. Saskia, PINNS, physics grounded LLMs. Cool. Let's grab this one from Maximilian. How'd you test for IQ on the models? As it's quite unbelievable that it has higher IQ than humans. Doesn't seem like it when chatting with it. No fluid intelligence test. Fantastic question. Let's close a few of these windows. LifeArchitect.ai /IQ testing AI. We can IQ test models to a certain extent. Everything I've cited so far is just for verbal linguistic. So the 152 example was Professor David Rosado, who tested GPT-4 on a verbal linguistic IQ test with the result that you can see there. Ika Rovainen used the WISE-3, which is a standard instrument we would even use for children here in Australia and the US, came out with an IQ, a verbal IQ of 155. Somehow they were able to also do the non-verbal, but I don't think she would have been, or they would have been able to do the manipulatives. There's gestures, there's movement testing in full IQ tests as well. I wrote a lot about that in the AI and IQ testing page if you want to have a read about that. But you're right that we're not really able at the moment to do a full IQ test on an AI large language model or a multimodal model, and it's almost not the right thing to do either, because they were designed for humans, they were designed to be administered to humans, whereas superintelligence is, let's say, 1,000 times the performance of a human. And that's why we rely on other testing besides IQ testing designed for humans. This is a great example, and we talked about that this last week. It's the Google Proof question and answers set designed by PhD experts, and where a human average might be 0%, well, besides the fact that it's multiple choice, so it could be a 25% chance. PhDs were scoring 34% on this if it wasn't their domain, and capping out at about 65%. So this is a cool measurement for high ceiling LLMs. I'm guessing that GPT-5 will get us a lot higher. When we want to test other stuff, so multimodality, we want to test their empathy, we want to test their movement, we want to test them creating something new, so originality and creativity, we're going to have to, I think, create a completely new test. I talked about how the GPT-4 model hits close to the ceiling on the Torrance test, the gold standard for testing creativity, got in the 99th percentile for originality. But it's a bit of a mishmash of tests that are shown here. Very, very difficult right now to come up with a one-size-fits-all test that's going to be able to test, you know, GPT-5 versus Claude 3. Awesome. Johnny's got a statement here for us. My comment pasting died, but we'll get it back. Sounds like AGI would be most capable of creating the best data sets. Yeah, if we had time today, I would post about talk about creating synthetic data sets from scratch. I might put this in the chat, actually, if you guys want to have a play around with it. Let's see what I can do here. Anyone with the link can view it. This is a synthetic data set thingy thing based on what the Cosmopedia guys did. Let me grab our screen share again. So Cosmopedia went and replicated the phi-3 data sets. Phi-3 had a paper called Microsoft for phi-3, or phi-2, or phi-1 had a paper called Textbooks Are All You Need. But in this, they admitted that they're not going to release what they were doing. We've omitted some details of the synthetic data generation for proprietary reasons, which makes it completely useless, but falls back into my explanation earlier of these labs just hiding stuff for trade secret reasons. In any case, Cosmopedia was a replication of that, and it was a very, very good replication of that, that spelt out the exact prompts that they used to generate synthetic data. So if you were to play around with this yourself, with the prompts that I have pasted in the shared document, you would get things like, well, there's 3 of them. A prompt for generating text for children, 0 to 11 years old, I've said. Prompts for generating text for high school students, I've said teenagers, 12 years old to 17 years old, well, nearly teenagers. And then for professionals and researchers in the field. Let's take 5 minutes to play with this for just a second. Anyone would like to suggest a topic and we'll have a play around with it. Let me grab Poe for a minute. We will grab Claude 3 Opus. The topic I'm looking for is as specific as we can. It can be picked out of a hat. And we're just going to demonstrate how a model might create the synthetic data for this from scratch. French cooking. Thanks, Johnny Mays. All right, so it's going to have a lot in the Common Crawl about French cooking. And then, of course, it's going to have a Wikipedia entry about French cooking as well. There's a whole massive blob here on French cuisine. Wow, that's a lot of text. I've got a fancy Chrome plugin here that allows me to select all. That's going to include the references. Right-click and do a word count. But we've got about, let's say, 10,000 words here, excluding references. And that might be about 7,500 tokens. And it's going to be pretty rigorous, and it's going to be pretty reliable. I rate Wikipedia quite highly. The way they do things is just nuts. If you know a Wikipedia editor, then you know someone who is neurodivergent and completely obsessed with a particular topic. Let's take this concept of French cooking and use one of our sentences, or we'll use all three eventually, from the Cosmopedia guys. And I want to acknowledge the original researchers who released this data. Now, phi-1 for Microsoft used GPT 3.5 to generate this, which, as you'll recall, is tiny. It's that tiny little model up the top there. GPT 3.5 Turbo was revealed to be 20 billion parameters, about 10% of the size of GPT-4. Let's use Claude 3, the latest of the greatest, to generate this just for fun. I've never tried this before, so please have some patience with me. Let's do this French cooking. Cosmopedia and the research really spelled out how onerous this process was and just how long it took. So what we're doing here is a very quick and dirty version. I think that's everything we need to do. So Claude 3 Opus here at 2 trillion parameters is going to go and write some synthetic data for us. You can see straight away the advantages and disadvantages of doing this. The advantages are we've got new data, probably completely open, no copyright data. The disadvantages are eventually we're going to lose resolution. If we kept doing this, we might just get hallucinations and confabulations. But right now, this is a really cool lump that I will go and throw into our shared document if you'd like to read it. How are we going to know which is which, Alan? Let's do some subheadings. We've got our children. Let's do our teenagers. And we'll grab the Cosmopedia prompt once again. I think one of the reasons that we wouldn't do this, or we wouldn't use this for Phi-4, is just how expensive Claude 3 Opus is. I'll go and steal our original... I can only steal pieces of this. I bet Alan AI would be more efficient than I'm being right now, but we don't have access to Alan AI yet. They spent a long time developing the second half of this prompt here, so obviously there's a little tweak that is for high school students, but they found that the meat of it was here. Use language examples that would relate with teenage students, balancing educational rigor with accessibility. Make the topic approachable and fun, sparking curiosity. Let's run that one for our teenagers. While we're running that one, Johnny's got a question here for us. Are synthetic datasets considered weaker than organic datasets in any way? Only in the eventuality that they break down. I think nearly all labs, or all labs, are leaning on this very heavily right now. I think in the Claude 3 paper as well, they mentioned that they had generated some synthetic data for Claude 3 Opus. So in some ways, we've got the snake eating its tail right now. Synthetic data being generated from a little bit of synthetic. plus a lot of organic data. Here's our teenagers output. And we'll start with, we'll finish with for researchers. Very soon, all of this little manual copy and paste stuff will be gone. Wait for OpenAI to release a very smart speech-to-text model, because speaking is 3 times faster than typing, and for it to almost have intuition about what you're trying to do. All right, this one's for professionals and researchers in the field. Engage a highly knowledgeable audience with very deep expertise in the topic, and we'll run that. Saskia's had some experience here where large synthetic data sets are weakly convergent, less imaginative, but nevertheless truthful. I'm really interested by this idea of truthfulness. There are labs that are on the bleeding edge of this, but it's so hard for me to imagine how we're even going to measure truthfulness. What's real, what's not. Even Wikipedia editors argue with themselves for, thousands of conversation turns about what's actual fact and what's not. How are we going to decide that for trillions of topics? This is a really long output here, but we'll wait and see how it goes. This was a fun exercise. Thanks for suggesting it. Why did Claude 3 run into a problem there? I don't think it hit its cap. Anyway, we can ask it to continue. We'll dump this into our researchers piece. And as if by magic, we've got another, say, 1,500 words, and we could easily expand that to 15,000 words. Easily, because this is just the first chapter. So the entire paper was on the fact that we could write textbooks synthetically using this methodology. A lot of fun to play with. Obviously, I've done the very, very quick version here, and I'm kind of impressed by the fact that this outputs in this way. Look at this. There's going to be a difference training on this sentence. It's a yummy stew made with vegetables like zucchini, eggplant, and peppers for ratatouille, versus this, let's find a researcher's sentence. Here we go. A study found... Oh, I've got some coughing going on. We're back. A study analysed the nutrient component or content of ratatouille. It's rich in vitamins, minerals, and fibre while being relatively low in saturated fat and added sugars. Fascinating. If we wanted to get more specific, we could do this entire synthetic dataset just about ratatouille, and you could see how this would be really onerous for the researchers, but you could also automate a fair bit of it. And that's what they're doing right now. Somewhere in Silicon Valley and in Beijing and in Tel Aviv, there are teams of thousands of people who are just doing this, getting their datasets ready for the next big model. Exciting times. Winsome. Humans read the work of other humans, but we don't lose resolution. Isn't the key being able to reason about it and generate new knowledge? Yes, you're right. Yep, reasoning is a big part of it. OpenAI's CEO has come out and said maybe it doesn't need to read 35 million books. Maybe it just needs to read a few thousand high-quality texts and chew on those in different ways. And generating synthetic data might be a good way for it to do, for it to get there. Hopefully we've answered all the questions. I think I got all the questions where I was tagged. People using Gemini to run across their PDFs, which is kind of cool. Child prodigy Terence Tao from Adelaide here in Australia, now a professor at UCLA, uses it to read his maths papers. I say now a professor at UCLA. He became a professor there in his very early 20s. He feeds it with his current maths discoveries. He's a Fields Medal Award recipient. And as a way of, keeping up with progress and evolution, he's embraced the current generation of LLMs. He advises the US government on this. He sits on a panel for Congress. And I think it's cool that he feeds white papers to these models and has it ask him questions about it. So we're very, very close to having it make new discoveries. Let's wrap up shortly. Maximilian's got a question. We're 10:07 a.m. here in Brisbane. What paper shows the best that LLMs can learn and self-improve without more human input to potentially become superhuman? I don't know the answer to that. Let's do a mixture of papers, right? So we've got the textbooks are all you need paper. Really worth reading. It's only 26 pages. Probably have the Claude 3 paper here. Oh, we've got the model card here. 42 pages. And I don't know if they mention... They mention a little bit about synthetic data here, but it's a very interesting discussion about RF reinforcement learning with AI feedback as well. What am I doing here? Obviously not. All right, I don't know if they mention the constitutional AI specifically, but that kind of discussion is very, very interesting. How they're using RF reinforcement learning with AI feedback. Don't see that term in here. As a way of fine-tuning these models and making them safe. So that's an interesting paper. I have an entire page on papers that are worth reading, but it's not up to date. I think my last update was a year ago. But there are probably a good 20 or 30 papers in there that are just worth reading to see how we got here. We start with Alan Turing's papers and we go all the way up to, last update was Gemini. let me see what I like. I like the Gatto paper because it was nuts. I like this Do As I Can, Not As I Say, the Saycan paper. Which was also talking about synthetic generation and learning just based on the environment. I've mentioned the GPT Neo X paper already. I've mentioned the Pile paper as well, which dovetails into my What's in My AI paper. Alan Dodge and who have we got? Martin Sapp, I think it is, at Alan AI have the documenting the English colossal clean crawled corpus, which again I used to dovetail into my What's in My AI paper. Might be useful. That's not about synthetic data as much as organic data. But that's the answers I've got this morning. OpenAI has a page of important papers too, says Selfinet. Excellent. Awesome, guys. That was a blast as usual. We got to spell out the synthetic data thing end to end, which I quite enjoyed. I'm hoping that this time next week, we're going to get a big model release. We were supposed to have the OpenAI GPT plus search model released in about 24 hours, but they have delayed that. And in any case, I personally wouldn't find it that interesting. There's a big difference between large language models and search, and even though we can combine them and it's kind of cool, u.com and perplexity.ai, for me, there are much better use cases than applying that to search. Thanks so much for joining me, especially to the Europeans, but wherever you are. I saw there was someone in here from Perth as well. I'm missing Perth quite a bit, but having a blast here in my new home in Brisbane. Consider joining me for the memo, which is my monthly or fortnightly, which is every 2 weeks, advisory notes that goes out to everyone. We've got paid subscribers from the US government, from RAND, from BCG, from Bain, from McKinsey, list goes on. And I'd love to have you in there as well. We've got a big discussion in the next edition, but I think I might hold off on the next edition until we actually have a decent model release to talk about besides Qwen-Max. All right, might see you this time in 2 weeks from now. Actually, I've got a timeout for next week while I'm in Tasmania for a keynote, and I'll see you the week after to play around with whatever the next big model is. And if there's a really big model, we might even insert a live stream whenever I can next week. Thanks for joining. See you soon.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.
Superintelligence is unfolding at lightning pace. Read my industry-grade analysis of AI that matters as it happens in plain English, the memo.
Yeah. Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo.
Get the inside look as AI models are embodied into humanoids, AI's IQ increases to nearly perfect, and bleeding-edge use cases expand to the entire world.
Yeah. Didn't you get that memo?
Editions are sent to subscribers at Fortune 500s, major governments, and people like you. LifeArchitect.ai/memo.
I have the memo.